And welcome to Stockton Alive, and here's your one and only host, the man who actually re-signed and didn't leave like a lot of Warriors did, Nate Knodt. Take it away, Nate.
Yes, I took the big bucks here at KX.
You took the
I'm
max
sorry,
deal?
I said KX. TVOSJ.
You took the max deal.
Yeah, I took the max deal, which means you get sometimes you get liquid beverages. That's about the, and maybe you can pick up some snacks and crackers on the way in the door. That's pretty much our pay here at the Voice of San Joaquin. That's how we wouldn't want to have it any other way, though, to be honest with you. In fact, I'm going to talk about money today in athletics. That's one of the things that's going to be one of my topics. Interestingly enough, since I don't think I revealed that to you before you opened the show. And but first of all, and this is not a new subject to Stocktonians, but I haven't talked about it much on this show or before. I'm just going to open up the show by talking a little bit about the incredible diversity that we have here, which to me is a good thing. I know there's a lot of people that find changing demographics to be threatening or worrisome or something. I don't really know why. It's generally well known in the world that people like variety, and that if you have everything the same, that it actually makes things kind of dull. But so having said that, and I did this on purpose because I wanted to prove how amazing the diversity is by ad-libbing a discussion about it. So I'm just going to start naming off all the nationalities that I can think of people that actually, now I can't tell you the names necessarily, but and would be better I probably don't say a lot of names on the show, but just point out all the different nationalities and ethnicities that I can think of just off the top of my head without having prepared. So, first of all, obviously we have Hispanics, and of Hispanics you have a lot of people who speak Spanish. However, some are from South America, some are from Central America, and then some are from Mexico. And of course, the most notable group here would be Mexican Americans of that group. And that's obviously, and then of course, it's stereotypical to say this, but many of the people over the years that I've known that are Mexican American, either they, their parents, their grandparents, or relatives there have been in the fields and picked a lot of crops. And growing up in Manteca, which is my home, Manteca and French Camp, before living in Stockton, I'm quite familiar with migrant farm workers. And of course, traveling through the Salinas Valley on Highway 101, I used to see the lettuce fields and see people out picking the crops. Now, in the San Joaquin Valley, we still have a lot of crops that are picked by hand, but machinery and of course mechanization has taken some of those jobs away. The most notable thing I can know over mechanization has changed it. And actually this has cost a lot of summer teenage jobs that used to exist, is we have the almond orchards around here, and it used to be, in addition to migrant farm workers, that a lot of teenagers coming out of high school or in the high school age bracket would be hired for temporary jobs that would last about 3 weeks to a month to do two things in the almond orchards. One, they would actually help knock the trees. You ever heard of that term? You know what that is?
No, I haven't heard of that term.
Almonds used to be picked. Here's how almonds used to be harvested. You used to actually literally get a rubber coated mallet thing, and used to actually just bang it and hit the tree trunk, and that would shake the tree and cause the almonds to fall off. And then you would rake up the almonds, and sometimes I think they put down a little bit of netting or sheets or something, but you would knock them out of the tree and then you'd scoop them up with rakes and things, and that was great summer employment. Now the other thing they used to do was they used to move irrigation pipes. Irrigation pipes back then, I think you still see this a little bit today, but a lot of the irrigation pipes had every 30 feet big wheels on them, and you actually could push and roll those irrigation pipes through the orchards to repossession them for watering. But most of this is all automated now. Nowadays, the way they do the almond, and I think walnuts are done the same way, you actually drive a backhoe, which actually has a little grip thing on the front of it, almost like an ice cube tweezer, and you just wrap it on the tree and you shake the tree with the backhoe, and all the stuff falls out. So anyway, but my point is, my greater point that led to all that was that when we talk about ethnicity, of course I grew up in French Camp, Manteca, and Stockton. Grew up a lot of Mexican American and a lot of migrant farm workers. Now I also will point out I'm actually from French Camp. I was 5 and a half when I moved to Manteca in August of 1962, which now tells the viewers how old I really am. Oh, by the way, I always usually I try to remember to tell you what the day is this show, so you know if you're watching it live or not. This show tonight, this moment, is live on Monday night, July 1st at about 6:05 p.m. is where we're at right now. So if you see it, and it's not Monday, July 1st, you're seeing a rebroadcast. But we are live at this moment on Monday night, July 1st. Okay, so anyway, I should point out that growing up in French Camp, there was a significant number of Japanese residents that lived in French Camp at the time that I lived there. Now, speaking of diversity, the very name French Camp is a matter of diversity. And most people are pretty familiar with this now. When I was a kid, I don't think it was talked about that much, but now in more recent years it has been. French Camp is French Camp because French people used to work there. But they were hired by a British company. So anyway, they got Hudson Bay. They had French trappers. They were up in the northern part of Canada in Hudson Bay, and the Hudson Bay Company, as they were making money off beaver pelts and skins and fur and whatever else you can do with, making leather and things like that out of beaver pelts and other animals like that. At some point, they realized that California, and what we now know as the Central or San Joaquin Valley, was then it was an undeveloped, almost swampland, a lot like the area in the bayous of Louisiana and Mississippi, where you basically had a lot of marshland, a lot of wild wild grass growth, lots of trees and shrubs, and God forbid, I don't know what the mosquitoes must have been like back then. Also a lot of standing water, though. Before we, quote-unquote, civilized the area or cleared out trees and planted crops and paved roads and put in houses, this area was all pretty much wild grassland. And even though the rain was never more than 10 or 11 inches, I think about 12 inches a year, with no runoff to speak of in those days, a lot of the water was kept by the soil and the vegetation. Also, the water table used to be like 5 feet underground. Now it's 40 or 50 or 100 or something. When I was a kid, it was supposed to be 8 feet underground, by the way, in the early 60s. That's how much we've withdrawn the water from the land underneath. But anyway, we had Japanese in French Camp because they were what's called truck farmers. And they called them truck farmers because in that era, they grew a lot of vegetables and fruit. Well, I don't know if it's so much fruit, mostly vegetables, but things like onions and tomatoes and green beans and things like that. And it was called truck farming because you would harvest it on your farm, put it into a truck, and then drive it to market. So that was a big deal in the early 60s still. And Japanese were very good at farming. And a lot of the reason we had the Japanese in French Camp and in the Central San Joaquin Valley is they came here because this area allowed them to buy property fairly cheaply in those days. And many of them had lost their property that they once had in the Bay Area when you had the Japanese you had the internment of Japanese during World War II, which we now know was unconstitutional. We finally paid reparations for it and everything else, and apologized and everything else. But the point was, French Camp proved to be a good place for these people to relocate to, this population to relocate to, back after World War II was over, and they were released from the internment camps, but their property had been taken away from them. And they were good at farming, so they came to French Camp, among other places. So I grew up with the Hayashinos, to name one family. I think there's a family, I know this is the name of a motorcycle, whatever, but I think there was a Kawasaki family. But anyway, and there was the Igusa family. So anyway, I grew up with a lot of Japanese people. I actually can eat with chopsticks. I actually learned to do that as a little kid. And ate sushi as a little kid, not knowing what a delicacy it's considered to be now. It was just commonplace. We used to go to Mickey Grove Park for an annual Japanese New Year's festival or something when I was a kid, and that was always a fun event. Okay, so after all this talk, I've only mentioned essentially Hispanic, Mexican Americans, and Japanese. But now in more recent times, there's a pretty strong Italian element, that's not the right word, population is what I want to say, with elements of their culture is what I was trying to say. Because we have the Bocce Club here, the Italian American Club. A fair number of people at one time or another went to St. Mary's High School or Pacific were Italian. Um, so anyway, well, for somebody, for example, like Dwayne Izzetti, who is a city councilman, an incredible athlete in the Stockton area. He's also one of our most recent Stocktonians of the year. He might be the current Stocktonian of the year. I can't remember now, but I know he is a Stocktonian of the year. And he and Gary Giovanetti, the former vice mayor of Stockton, who's now on the RTD board of directors, are very active with the Italian American Club. And my wife and I have been out there many times. We know many people who go there and have invited us to various different dinners and meals and events there. They've traditionally had a big law enforcement night out there. So, pretty strong Italian element. We have Greek people here, obviously. We have quite a big Greek presence. Of course, we have Papa Pavlo's restaurant and Spanos family. And then, because of our involvement with the Vietnam War, we then picked up pretty much everything you can think of in terms of all the different various cultures and nationalities of Southeast Asia. I can name 5 or 6. There's more than that, but you've got Vietnamese, Cambodian, Lao, Hmong, and that's something. And I was a public school teacher, so you see all this in the public schools. You come in contact with other people, and so we have all the Southeast Asian, virtually, I think just about every type of Southeast Asian country or nationality is represented in Stockton. And we obviously have many good restaurants with all of these different cultures represented. Famously, some Mexican food critic who has been based in New York and Los Angeles for many years, who apparently had never tasted Central Valley Stockton Mexican food, who had always touted the really super delicacies of New York and Philadelphia and Los Angeles. Very famously, about a year ago, was in the Stockton Record, this gentleman finally tasted some San Joaquin Valley food and some Stockton food, and said that actually Stockton has some of the finest Mexican restaurants in the United States of America, including New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco and all these other places. So that is an incredible compliment. Now, I know people are sitting there thinking, you're leaving out a major one there, Mr. Knodt. Well, no, I'm not leaving it out. I'm just kind of saving it for last. And there's many more than this. We have Russian people here. We have Armenian people. We have actually, there's a surprisingly high percentage of people whose primary language in Stockton is Armenian, of all crazy things. But no, I did not forget about Filipinos because Stockton is home to Little Manila. And as I also taught at Edison High School. And the number one demographic at Edison High School is Filipino. Followed by Mexican American and Filipino are neck and neck in terms of the percentage of student enrollment. Then after that, it would be African American. The last time I knew, Edison had about 4% of what would be called white, non-Hispanic, or Caucasian. So, of which I fit into that category. I never did finish the story about French Camp's name, by the way, real briefly, because I was talking about how diverse we are. The name of French Camp is a diversity thing. Because we had this kind of swamp land, bayou land that was full of standing water and trees and shrubs and grasslands, there was a lot of animal life here, such as beavers. And the British, I think it's called the Hudson Bay Company, which was British, sent French fur trappers to French Camp to get these things, get these pelts. And French Camp is, in fact, California's oldest inland settlement, dating back to 1828. The only settlement older in California than French Camp is the El Camino Real, the Spanish, Catholic missionary trail up and down the north coast, up and down the Pacific Ocean coast of California and the Salinas Valley, which is now the El Camino Real is now largely replicated by Highway 101. Parts of it Highway 1 and parts of it Highway 101. And of course, you actually have a boulevard in Santa Clara and San Jose called the El Camino Real. So we have this great culture diversity. Then, if you don't think about how much Stockton has the diversity, and I've actually only touched on a small part of it, and probably haven't done the best job in the world explaining it, then we're neighbors with San Francisco in the Bay Area, where you have virtually every nationality in San Francisco. That might be the most cosmopolitan city in the entire world. I don't know if statistics prove that out or not, but I don't know of many cities in the world that have more cultures and personalities and ethnicities and immigration and emigration and certainly with the restaurants San Francisco has. At one time, it used to have the most restaurants per capita population of any city in the United States. I don't know if that's still true. But it had even more restaurants per capita than New York City. So even if you don't find the diversity you're thinking of in Stockton, San Joaquin County, it's right there in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And then you've got L.A. L.A. is also very diverse. I don't know of any city that's really any more diverse than L.A. And then, of course, we've also got Indian and Middle Eastern cultures. We have pretty much everything in this area. And if you go and especially if you go to a public school, you'll see this. So, with that having been said, I specifically on purpose chose to talk about that at the top of the show tonight without preparing, because I wanted to see how much we could come up with without even researching it or coming up with some dry speech about it. So that was literally spontaneous off the top of my head of the various diversities and nationalities and cultures. And I know I left some out. And I don't even know if I mentioned specifically African American. I did as far as the Edison demographics. And we don't have a huge African American population by percentage. I think it's 8 or 9%. I think it's less than people realize in the Stockton, San Joaquin area. But certainly it's a measurable amount. And of course, one of the great cultural heroes of California actually had a big presence here in Stockton. That would be Cesar Chavez. And of course, Dolores Huerta is still a Stockton resident. Now getting up there a little bit in the years, I'm sure Betty's probably talked to her, met her many, many times. I've never been specifically introduced to her. I've been at events she's at. Because she was just a young little rabble-rousing activist, young lady woman when it all started with Cesar Chavez. And he famously did his hunger strike in order to get better working conditions for migrant farm workers. And, of course, got the United Farm Workers organization going. So with that, that's our little discussion about Stockton diversity. And, again, it isn't just you have the people and you have all the cultures. Think about what you get with diversity. You get different clothing styles, you get different languages, you get different customs, you get different religions and churches. You get different types of shops and little boutiques. There's a couple shopping centers in Stockton. If you go there, you could be renting videos in Lao or Hmong, or you could be getting Bollywood videos with Indian culture. In other words, we're not just stuck here with John Wayne and Gregory Peck or something. We've got quite a variety of things here. And then, of course, the entertainers who come to Stockton. There's a lot of diversity with that, too. There's a comedian coming to Stockton. I don't remember exactly his name. I want to say it's Joe Coy, and I think it's Koy. He's Filipino.
Yeah, Joe Coy is...
Yeah, and he's already sold out the Fox, I think. Yeah.
Really big.
They're talking... So you're familiar with him then?
Yeah, he's really big in the comedy world and actually the urban comedy world.
And apparently his sales are so overwhelming that they're going to they may try to squeeze in 3 shows over 2 days or something like that. Now, George Lopez famously comes here at least every other year. And every time he comes here, the sales are so brisk they usually have to have 2 shows. This year he did 1 show on one weekend and somehow squeezed in a second trip back 3 weeks later and did a second show. I remember the second show was on May 24th. I don't remember. The first one was in April at some point. And then we have all the cultures with the military, too. We've got the American Legion. And we've got, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW. And so you've got just everything you could possibly ever want is right here in Stockton. And we've got it all in all ways. That was the point I was trying to make. We've got the restaurants, we've got the clothing, we've got the cultures, we've got the shops, we've got the music. You've got the stage plays. If you go to live stage plays in and around Stockton, you've got the Mexican folklorical dancing. Just virtually amazing number of things that you can catch on. We've got the oldest. I almost did leave out one of the big ones. We have the oldest Sikh temple in the United States in Stockton. The one that's over on, I believe it's Grant Street over by the Union Pacific Railroad tracks, near, I think it's about Grant and about 6th Street, or in that general vicinity, is the oldest Sikh temple. Now, for those of you who've never heard it spelled, it's Sikh, if I remember right. I think I'm leaving something out there. Anyway, and they have the big parade that they do once a year, which draws a huge number of people. And of course, we have Cinco de Mayo parades, and we have all these other, and we have the, Dia de Muerte, and all these other things. So we get all of that. And we have the wonderful center downtown with the Mexican Heritage Center, run by my former principal at King Elementary, Gracie Madrid. Now, there you had a Hispanic woman, Gracie Madrid, as principal of a school named after Martin Luther King Elementary, which I taught at for a while. And, of course, I taught at Edison. So it's pretty amazing what we have here. So people should just chill out, relax, kick back, and enjoy it. Enjoy the diversity. Enjoy the different clothing, the different cultures, the different customs. Of course, we have the Greek Food Festival every year. And we have a major Jewish population here, too. I mentioned that Dwayne Izzetti is an Italian-American, was a Stocktonian of the Year. Well, we also had a Jewish Stocktonian of the Year just a couple years back. So in any event, we've got it covered pretty well. And women have a big place in Stockton, San Joaquin County, too. I think women probably are allowed to express their careers here as well or more than they are anywhere else in the United States. And I work at RTD, where the chief executive officer is a woman, the deputy CEO and chief financial officer is a woman, and the chief of operations is also a woman, and the person who's in charge of RTD maintenance is a woman. So, it's just a lot of incredible diversity in Stockton that we can be happy about and rejoice over and just enjoy it and, fully take advantage of it. We have both Japanese and Chinese, by the way. That's another thing. We have the two wonderful types of food there. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about, I went to Bend, Oregon on a trip. And the only reason I'm not mentioning, it's not because I went to Bend, Oregon, this is a big deal. I'm just going to describe how the trip worked and to let people know how relatively lucky we are in Stockton to have many travel options. Generally speaking, if you're willing to look up the information and you keep an open mind about it, you've got 4 ways to travel in Stockton. You've obviously got the car, because we're at the intersection of Highway 99 and Interstate 5, which is merged by Highway 50 and the Crosstown Highway, which is technically Highway 4, which 50 used to be a part of, but 50 had been superseded by Interstate 5. So we've got major freeways, and we're at a major junction point of 2 of the busiest freeways in the United States, and giving us tremendous north-south travel options by car. And then, of course, I-80, you've got I-205 and I-5, and I-80 getting you to the Bay Area. Then, of course, we have, as we've alluded to a few times, I'll talk about a little bit more today, we have Amtrak service. And relative to most cities in the United States, we have a very robust Amtrak service. We don't just have a token train a day or something that's within 20 miles. We have fairly high-level service right here in Stockton, going in multiple directions on multiple routes. We also have the ACE commuter train. We are the smallest city by population in North America, and that means we're talking Canada, Mexico here also when I say North America. We're the smallest city. Even though Stockton's a big city at 310,000, we are the smallest city to be the home base of a full-fledged, full-size commuter rail system, which of course is the ACE, the Altamont Corridor Express. And I'll come back to all these things in a little bit more detail in a moment. Then we actually have, by today's standards, relatively good bus service in that as far as getting around. I'm not speaking specifically of RTD here within Stockton so much as being able to get around to the other cities in San Joaquin County, and then also getting out of town with intercity travel on Greyhound. Greyhound, as we've alluded to a handful of times, is only kind of a shadow of what it once was. Until the early 90s, most people are shocked when they hear this. Until the early 90s, Greyhound was the largest passenger carrier in the United States as a single company. Now, bus travel had been reduced to a fairly small part of the market share, but as an individual company, until the early 90s, Greyhound was bigger than any single airline as far as the number of people, as far as by far the amount of territory they served, but by far how many passengers they carried. They used to have well over 100 million passengers a year. Now Southwest Airlines is the number 1 passenger company in America, and I think at about 142 million or something like that. And they've grown dramatically. It wasn't that many years ago. They were more like 70 or 80 million. And they started out as a little puddle jumper in Texas. And their first big thing that they did was start flying to Las Vegas from Texas, which I saw them. I saw Southwest Airlines when nobody knew who the heck they were when I lived in Las Vegas back in the early 80s. But anyway, the point is we have 16 Greyhound trips a day out of Stockton. The only sad thing is they're pretty much all north and south now. We're talking local or express buses to Sacramento, Fresno, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, San Diego, and Calexico. We no longer have good east-west service out of Stockton. We used to have direct service to Reno. We used to have direct service to San Jose, direct service to Oakland, San Francisco, and even direct service to Sonora and a couple other places. That's pretty much all gone. And we used to have about 85 schedules a day out of Stockton. Now it's 16. But if you look at Greyhound service nationally, our 16 trips a day is actually quite a bit more than most places. And Greyhound operates out of the RTD Downtown Transit Center, which is a beautiful passenger facility designed for bus service and designed for multiple types of bus service in downtown Stockton, with a very beautiful, wonderful passenger customer service center waiting room lounge, which is very nice, completely clean and shiny, kept up to the standards of an airport. And it looks like a little mini, it looks like our customer service lounge looks like the loading gate you'd see at an airport, with the waiting room chairs and the doors to go out to board, and then you have customer service agents there selling tickets and things. And we do both RTD and Greyhound. And of course, RTD can take you on direct service to with trips pretty much all day long on weekdays, and with limited trips on weekends to Lathrop, Manteca, Tracy, Lodi, and we also now have our RTD Van Go service that can take you all throughout San Joaquin County, picking you up at specific locations and dropping you off. But we're gonna do a whole RTD special show along with our super duper transportation show sometime before the end of this calendar year. But so we have automobile travel with two major freeways that can take you anywhere, and you can easily connect to I-80 to go eastbound towards Chicago and Salt Lake City, Denver, and the entire east, or you can go south to LA and then go east. Then you can go west to San Francisco. So we've got great highway travel here, in as much as that exists. Then we have Amtrak service. Now I'll be a little more specific. We have essentially 3 Amtrak routes out of Stockton. Most people don't realize there's 3 different ways you can go on Amtrak. You can go to Oakland in the Bay Area with direct bus connections with a direct connecting bus, guaranteed bus, to San Francisco, which will take you to 3 destinations in San Francisco. The Transbay Transit Terminal, which is the Amtrak Center, ticket counter, and then you can go to Pier 39, and you can also go to the San Francisco Shopping Center on Market Street. That you can go right directly there by taking an Amtrak train and the guaranteed automatic connecting bus that they provide. All for one fare. Your luggage and everything can go with you. Then from Stockton, you have routes that diverge south to Bakersfield on the old Santa Fe route, which means you've got service to, it used to be Riverbank, now it's actually a Modesto station, although it's on the outer edges of Modesto. And then you've got Denair, which is for Turlock, and you've got Hanford, Wasco, Fresno, and Bakersfield. And then from Bakersfield, you've got like 7 bus routes that could take you to multiple Southern California points and directly to Las Vegas and Barstow and San Bernardino. And then you can go north from Stockton on Amtrak to Sacramento, where you can connect to trains to Seattle or the California Zephyr going eastbound towards Denver, Salt Lake City, Chicago, and all that. And going north, you can go to all points in Oregon and, well, I shouldn't say all points, but the major cities in Oregon, up to Eugene, Salem, Portland, and then on to Vancouver, Washington, up in the cities in Washington State, up to Seattle. And from Seattle, you can go east to Chicago, and you go north to Vancouver.
You took the train to Oregon, right?
Well, yeah, that's how I'm going to get to that trip in just a little bit. But the idea was because I took that trip, I'm going to, after explaining what services kind of exist, I'm going to explain how my specific trip actually worked. And it's both a good news, bad news thing. It could be better, but it's also nice that it's available. And then, of course, we have airline service. Now, for years, we didn't have airline service. We actually had great airline service when I was a kid, but that's because it was regulated. Now, when I say great because it was regulated, I'm not trying to imply the government regulations in and of themselves are a good thing. I should qualify that by saying the airline industry, middle-level cities such as Stockton were required to have relatively high levels of I kind of just created that term off the spot here, is you had major, it wasn't puddle jumpers, you had major airplanes coming in here. When I was a kid, you still had DC 6s and 7s coming in, which were the four-engine propeller planes that were the great airliners of the 50s. And then, of course, we had jet air service, and I can name several airlines that had jet air service here over the years. We had PSA, which is Pacific Southwest Airlines, which I firmly believe Southwest Airlines copied some of their business model, which was frequent flights at cheap fares. That was PSA's thing. They had Air California, later known as AirCal. We had Hughes Air. I almost said the joke saying instead of the real Hughes Air West. I almost said Hughes Air Worst. That was a joke that they used to make about it. That was Howard Hughes' last airline that he owned after he lost control of TWA. And yes, they had the yellow jets, which they used to call the big banana in the sky. At one time, I believe we had Republic Airlines. We had Golden Pacific Airlines. And at this point, the deregulation kicked in, the big jets and the big airlines. We had United. I mean, I flew in here on United at one time. And so we had all the major, I think Delta may have at one time or other flown in here. I don't think American never flew jets in here. They did fly, we had United Express and another version. We had American Eagle, which is an American Airlines subsidiary. We had small turboprop planes. Now, August 6th, I believe, is when we're going to have the service restored to Los Angeles with United Airlines, and it will be with smaller jets, but it will be jet airplanes. I wasn't sure about that when they first announced it. I thought it might be small, like 25 or 30 passenger turboprops, but no, we're getting a small version of jets that seat like 50, 60 people. And if I remember right, we're going to have 2 flights a day to LA to start with. And they're coming August 6th because we are going to be the home, speaking of diversity, we are the chosen home on the 50th, it's either the 40th or 50th anniversary, I forgot which, of the statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce convention is coming to Stockton. And because of that, the United Airlines service is going to start 4 days sooner than it was originally scheduled to, just to make sure that we can accommodate all the travelers who want to come to Stockton. So we have everything. We got automobile travel, we got rail travel, we got air travel, and we got bus travel. And we have commuter service. We have within the RTD, we obviously have the electric buses, hybrid buses. We have the express routes. We have the Metro hoppers that are good for senior citizens. And now we have the Van Gogh service that does a lot of pickup and drop-off service. So here's how my trip, now to give you an idea how something like this works, the options you have. Okay, we could have driven straight to Bend, Oregon from Stockton, mostly on I-5. And it would have taken, I want to say, 8 to 9 hours. You'd probably have to stop twice. Once probably to get fuel. You could go, I think you could go nonstop, but you're probably going to have to fuel up somewhere. And you're going to want to stop at least once to eat probably. But you can drive straight there on modern freeways, and except in the wintertime when it gets a little iffy with some of the storms and stuff around December and January, you're going to get through pretty easily. And it's not too difficult a trip. You do climb over the Cascade Mountains, but it's, modern roads cut through the mountains pretty easily. But if you're not somebody who wants to sit, and I get all cramped up in a car though. Cars aren't big. I have long legs, even though I'm not ginormous or enormously tall. I just don't fit in cars well. And I get very cramped sitting in cars, and I get a sore back, and I get my legs all stiffened up and everything. So I don't really like traveling by car that much. We used to have direct bus service on Greyhound, and we no longer have that. You can go to Portland, Oregon, or points in Oregon where you can catch connecting bus service to Bend, Oregon. By the way, we're going for a family reunion. My brother lives in a big fancy resort. And actually, he lived near Redmond, Oregon, which is about 15 miles northeast of Bend. Now, speaking of that, I was shocked to learn that Redmond has a major jet airport. And there's multiple jet flights a day from San Francisco and even Sacramento, I think. So we could have flown there also. From either Oakland, San Francisco, or Sacramento, I believe. But anyway, we chose... And like I said, you could go by bus, but you'd have to connect from Salem, Eugene, or Portland, and that makes it a fairly long bus trip with the transfer. I like to travel by train. That's been known by anyone who knows me for a long time because it's very spacious. The motion. People who never travel by train don't understand how pleasant the motion is. Being for something, there's something about the rocking motion of the train on the rails. When the track is good, I should point out, when it's not bad track, that's very pleasing and relaxing, and you don't understand this until you've actually done it. And it's a little bit different from BART, by the way. You can't really judge rail travel by BART. Now, BART trains are very comfortable, and they do a great job, and they're very fast. But the motion on a big passenger train, the feeling of motion you get is a little bit different than when you get on a BART train or a light rail. And then, of course, going up there, we were on the Coast Starlight, which is a long-distance train. And long-distance trains historically have sleepers, coaches, a dining car, and a full-fledged lounge car. And on the Western United States trains, these are double-deck cars. And the lounge car, where the entire upper deck is all windows practically, from the foot to above the ceiling, or curving into the ceiling. Spectacular views from that car. And by the way, from the time it's a night trip out of Northern California. You pass, if the train is on time, you pass by Mount Shasta at about 5 in the morning. I'm sorry, about 5:15, which means that if you're in the May to late August era, you'll actually can see Mount Shasta by the early dawn, the crack of dawn. And it's that that early morning light glistens off the huge snow-capped Mount Shasta, which is just a gigantic mountain when you see it in person. Sticking up all by itself, by the way. Unfortunately, again, the train goes through there early in the morning, and it goes through late at night in the other direction. You really don't see it normally. Now, I did see it on this trip. We were about an hour late out of Sacramento, and we were on one of the longest days of the year with this trip. So I did in fact see Mount Shasta in the morning going northbound on the train. Now, here's how the train works from Stockton going northbound. There's a couple different ways you can do it, but I prefer to take the all-rail route. So you can catch a San Joaquin train out of Stockton on the station from San Joaquin Street, which is the old Santa Fe station. That's the oldest station of Stockton, dating back to 1900. So yes, that station is 119 years old. And you go to Martinez, and you leave here about 8 o'clock at night, and you get there about 8:50 in the evening. And the Coast Starlight, which originates in Los Angeles, coming north through the Salinas Valley, the Pacific Ocean, Santa Barbara, Salinas Valley, then through Oakland, then curves over to Sacramento. It comes through Martinez at about 9:45. You have about a 55-minute layover in Martinez. Now, Martinez is a modern, beautiful station that's very nice to sit in. Actually, of the San Joaquin route, all the stations are new or renovated except for Stockton's. I hope one day we can. And our station's got a nice architecture and everything, but it's just in a rough part of town. It's just kind of old and tired and run down looking. But anyway, so you go to Martinez, and then you catch the Coast Starlight in Martinez. And if it's on time, you're catching it at about 10 o'clock, and you wind up, if you go all the way to, say, Portland, you get there about 2 in the afternoon. If you go to Seattle, you get there about 8 o'clock the next evening. If you're going to where we went to, we arrived in Bend, Oregon. I should say we arrived in a little town called Chemolt, where we got off on a big fancy platform but not a station, and we connected to a shuttle type bus that then took us on about a 40-minute trip north to Bend, Oregon. So it was train from Stockton to Martinez, transferred from corridor train to long distance train in Martinez with about an hour layover, and then we wound our way up through Sacramento, Marysville, Chico, Redding, and then over the Cascade Mountains. And you get to Klamath Falls about 7:30 a.m. the next morning, and we got to Chemolt, Oregon at about, I want to say 8:45 in the morning, where our connecting bus, which is a guaranteed connection, is waiting for you, and then you drive about 50 more minutes up to Bend. So we got to Bend at about 9:50 the next morning. Now, that, by a number of hours, that's a very slow trip, and I realize that. But you're sitting in you're in a spacious coach seat that's bigger than first class seat on an airplane. You got the lounge car and you have the dining car. We did, in fact, have breakfast in the dining car going north. The southbound trip is not quite as convenient because by the time you board in Chemolt coming south, the diner is either closed or closing. And if you're on time, you arrive in Sacramento before you have time to get to the diner, which we did. The train was an hour late coming south. By the way, the southbound trip, you normally connect to a bus direct to Stockton. Or you could theoretically connect to the San Joaquin train. In our particular case, our train surprisingly arrived early in Sacramento, but just in time to watch the San Joaquin train roll out. Just as our train came to a stop and we got off the bottom steps of our train, the San Joaquin train, one track over, tooted the two horns and off it went to Stockton. And that's not considered a connection. They don't have that built into your tickets or anything. But we had about a 30-minute layover in Sacramento where we then caught a connecting bus that came straight to Lodi and Stockton. So southbound, the trip, we left, it's leaving Bend, Oregon about 6 o'clock, board the train in Shimoda about 8 o'clock, get to Sacramento about 6:15 a.m., catch a bus at about 7 a.m. and wind up in Stockton, I think at 7:45 a.m.
How would you describe Bend, Oregon to people who've never been there?
Excellent question. Ever heard of the famous saying, a tale of two cities?
Yes.
Bend, Oregon is a tale of two cities. You've got the historic Bend, Oregon, which is dramatically and very scenically cut right through the middle by the Deschutes River, which is a major river. It's the second biggest river in Oregon, I believe, after the Columbia River that goes through Portland, coming out of, and is the border, the Columbia River is the border between Oregon and Washington for several hundred miles.
Yeah.
And I have traveled what used to be an Amtrak route that paralleled that. Two routes used to parallel the Columbia River. One was called the Pioneer, which was a Salt Lake City with connections from Chicago to Seattle train by way of Portland. And then the Empire Builder, which is a long-distance train out of Seattle. I'm sorry, there's a Portland section of the train out of Portland going up to Spokane that connects to the bigger train going on to Chicago. And I've done both those trips. Now, unfortunately, the Pioneer trip doesn't exist anymore. The Empire Builder does. But anyway, so the Deschutes River goes right through the middle of Bend, Oregon. And I did not know that, but there's a reason it's called Bend. Well, every city has a reason for its name. Stockton's named after Commodore Stockton, of course. Perceived to be a great military guy and kind of a war hero. Not exactly true. Not the greatest guy in the world either, but whatever. Bend, Oregon is called Bend, Oregon because the Deschutes River actually takes a big left-hand turn or southbound turn right in the middle of what is now known as Bend, Oregon. And it's called Bend because the bend in the river was where they used to trap the logs. For people who are not familiar with logging as it used to be done, logs often were chopped down and rolled down a hill and then floated by river to another location. Well, Bend, Oregon used to be the home destination of logs floated down the Deschutes River. And the curvature or sharp turn that the river took, which can be called a bend, is where they trapped the logs to pull them out. They built little dams, and they caught the logs in the dam, pulled them out of the river, and then put them into the old-fashioned lumber mills. And in fact, the historic part of Bend, Oregon now is the River Mill District, where they have some old lumber mills, that were gentrified and turned into a very popular eating and touristy places. A much bigger, better version of what you would think of in Stockton as the waterfront warehouse. Now, so here's the answer to your question, Dustin. The part of Oregon, the part of Bend where the Bend River is extraordinarily scenic. And there's a dramatic change in geography, too, in elevation, where one side of the river has a big cliff that goes up about 120 feet or something. And then Bend, Oregon is actually 3,000-something feet elevation. So you've got forest there. You've got green forest and everything, and great shrubbery and greenery. So the area where the river is, which is the original part of the city, is also historic, gentrified. Now it's a great tourist place. That's wonderful. Now, when you get to the business part of Bend, which would be on the northeast side of Bend, Oregon, which is where the transit center was, where the bus left us off at, it looked just like Modesto or Stockton, or it looked just like a California Valley town. So Bend, Oregon is part mountain resort with a river, and with a lumber mill history and culture. And by the way, the brew pubs there are a big deal, of course. There's brew pubs all over the place. And Oregon's famous for that, and Bend is definitely one of the places. Also the restaurants there. And they have some major resorts there. And again, it's forested mountains right there. A place called Mount Bachelor's about an hour away or an hour and a half away. And that's there's actually 5 mountains that are all within close range and all visible from Bend, Oregon. Everything in Oregon is volcanic. I don't know how many people know that.
Yeah.
And, Crater Lake is the crater of a big mountain. And by the way, you go right by Crater Lake on the train. If it's a clear, sunny morning like we saw, you see Crater Lake, and you go by lakes and rivers the whole trip. from Mount Shasta all the way to Portland, Oregon, and all the way to Seattle is scenic. And certainly it was scenic. And Chemolt, where we got off, was very scenic. One bad thing about Chemolt, like many mountain areas, the mosquitoes were just amazing. Hungry, voracious, aggressive. If I ever wanted to live in Bend, Oregon, or Chemolt, you definitely have to have some mosquito spray.
Two legendary broadcasters actually live in Bend, Oregon.
Oh, really? Who are?
Dan Fouts, the former University of
I forgot
Oregon
about
quarterback
that.
in the San Diego Chargers.
And the former water equipment boy for the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, and a great broadcaster. And then Ralph Lawler, who was the longtime voice of the Los Angeles Clippers, who just retired this offseason.
Yes, I'm vaguely aware of his name and everything. I didn't know much about him.
Is this Bingo? Is this...
Now, Dan Fouts' dad, Bob Fouts, was also a play-by-play announcer for the 49ers.
Yes, he was.
Before somebody else, I guess before Lon Simmons, Then Lon Simmons.
Lon Simmons had twice.
Yeah, and then went to Don Klein, and then back to Lon Simmons, and then Joe Starkey, and now, of course, it's...
Ted Robinson.
Yeah, I was going to say Ted Robinson,
then it's Greg Papa this upcoming year.
And Ted Robinson and Greg Papa and Don Klein have all done Stanford football, too. Along with Barry Tompkins, I think, has done Stanford. I think at least on a relief role.
Barry
Okay,
Tompkins.
so anyway, we talked so much about the travel, we didn't even get to the sports stuff.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes left if you want to talk about
Well,
it.
it's probably just about right. I was going to talk about diversity of sports in Stockton. Now, we've touched on this a little bit before, but not in the way I'm going to talk about it today. We are uniquely blessed in Stockton now, as in the last since 2005. We always had, we've almost always had minor league baseball, and California is considered the best Class A minor league baseball. And the great thing about Class A California baseball is that we get major league ball players on injury rehab assignments. I saw Barry Zito pitch in Stockton the same year he led the Giants to a World Series triumph over Detroit. That was a great thrill. Now, having said that, so we get to see major league athletes play in Stockton as part of our minor league sports teams. Then we have AAA hockey. The Stockton Kings with the Stockton Heat. The NBA G League, I would assume would be considered AAA because those guys they're going literally to and from the NBA, as the hockey players are going to and from the National Hockey League. And then, of course, we know Matt Chapman, who's now an All-Star, played for 1 or 2 years in Stockton. And we've had many great, Gary Sheffield played in the Ports. We could go on for an hour with all the people playing for the Ports that made the major leagues, especially at one time with the Baltimore Orioles. But anyway, the great Earl Weaver teams mostly came out of Stockton. Dwayne Kuiper played in Stockton. I think he played with the Reno Silver Sox at one time.
One is a lonely number.
Yeah.
As everybody doesn't know, Dwayne Kuiper only had one
Right.
home run in his career. And I
Right.
think,
And
you know who it was off? Can you guess who it was off?
I don't remember who it was off.
It was off a fellow broadcaster who actually calls games with the White Sox right now.
Oh, okay.
Steve
Was that
Stone.
Steve Stone, who was a former Giant, too.
Former Giant, former Cub, former
Yeah.
White Sox.
He started his career with the Giants
Yeah.
in 1971.
Baltimore, too. I believe he was a Oriole for a little bit. But Steve Stone was an underrated pitcher in his career. But,
And he became a big-time announcer with the Cubs.
and then now with the White Sox.
And now with the White Sox,
So,
right.
but Steve Stone, so Kuiper always
I
says
forgot it was Steve Stone. Stone was known for giving up home runs.
Yeah, Kuiper always teases him about that.
And then he hit it like 2 feet over the fence, and he hit it down the right field line, so it's like about a 345-foot home run.
I believe, was he with the Indians at the time?
Yeah, I was in Cleveland Municipal Stadium. I've seen the highlights several times.
And the catcher.
And the crowd was about 9,000 something on a weeknight.
And Dwayne Kuiper and Ray Fosse were teammates,
Right.
and now his brother called games with Ray Fosse.
Right, that's amazing. So
All
we've
full
got
circle.
we have Major League Sports represented by AAA sports, which is the highest level of sport, professional minor league sports. We have the Great California League with the Ports.
Which the All-Star
Then
game will be in Stockton next year.
Oh, that's right. It's coming
California
back.
All-Star game.
And our ballpark was once considered one of the 10 best minor league ballparks in the nation. I don't know if it's still there now, but it was when it was built. Then we've got Division I basketball with Pacific. Numerous times we've talked about how many great games we played in Stockton, the great atmosphere that was at the Civic Memorial Auditorium, and all the great exploits of Pacific basketball. And then we've had nationally champion women's volleyball with Pacific. We've had state women's volleyball champion with Delta College. Delta College, we know, has had state championship baseball teams, which you have done PA announcing for.
Oh, no, I do it for
And
the
this year
softball program, but yeah.
This year they were 2 wins away from a championship.
Yep.
They were ranked 1 in the nation, for most of one season. Delta's also had excellent swimming. UOP has nationally ranked swimming. UOP missed by 3 minutes of a national championship in water polo about 4 years ago. Then we have that's community college, and then we have a high level of high school athletics here. Now, I've got mixed feelings about St. Mary's. I come from public high schools, and they definitely can recruit athletes, and I'm not going to debate people about that today on this show, but I will at least say, though, it does give us the opportunity to see a high level of high school sports, because they do have a premier sports program. Lincoln High School has been premier. And in terms of great talent and some great dominant teams in the past, Stagg High School, Edison, and Franklin. And we had NFL players and NBA players come out
and
of here.
MLB pitchers.
Yeah, and a lot of Major League Baseball players from here, yes. So
Dallas Braden, yeah. Before we go, we have a couple minutes. I want to get your thoughts on Kevin Durant leaving the Warriors.
It's disappointing in a way, but I would say it's kind of like the Pablo Sandoval thing with the Giants and the Red Sox about 5 years ago, or whenever that was, 4 years. Yeah, 5 years ago. As great as he is, as much as he contributed to Warriors, I love the guy to death, and he was playing terrific this year. I'm kind of relieved he's gone, because I think ultimately for the Warriors to sustain their excellence, they would need the money from his salary to go out and get good young players that they can develop. The Warriors are good at developing their own talent. So and given his injury, and I hope he makes 100% recovery. I'd love to see him return as an NBA, MVP or whatever. I wish him no ill will. He played terrific for the Warriors. He certainly cemented them as a dynasty franchise. But I'm relieved he's gone because of the salary he commands. And the Warriors need to rebuild with the salary cap.
I still don't get them saying they might retire his number. Joe Lacob came out and said that in a statement today. No Warrior will ever wear the number 35 ever again.
I don't have a real problem with that. He definitely helped him become a dynasty.
Yeah, but they won without him, and they want the one maybe without him again.
By the way, I firmly believe, and I know you're rooting for the Trailblazers, I firmly believe the Warriors, I strongly believe the Warriors would have beat Toronto if Klay Thompson had just remained healthy. Maybe, I think they would have won Game 6, and I think they would have won Game 7.
Kawhi Leonard might be a Laker. But, Nate, it's always been fun with you. Have a great 4th of July upcoming.
Yep.
And we're not supposed to date the shows, but, hey, it's upcoming. Have a great holiday, and until next time.
And remember, strength in numbers was the Warriors slogan. I say strength in diversity, which is also strength in numbers and variety.
Until next time, you've been listening to and watching Stockton Alive with Nate Knodt. Good night.